There is that feeling, though, of coming into the new year, hoping for a feeling of being refreshed, renewal, coming out of that week between Christmas and New Year's, right, where we lose all track of time. Maybe you're like me, you call that week like the abyss or the dead zone. Your only way of keeping track of the days, of the hours is the amount of Christmas cookies you have left. Have you eaten all your Christmas cookies? And for me, like we had, we kind of, got through all of our Christmas desserts just like a few days ago. And then I realized, okay, it's time to go back to work, I guess. That was the only way I knew. But maybe for you, it was nice to have the spaciousness of that liminal space between the end of one year and the beginning of another. There's a phrase in Italian, dolce far niente. It's one of those beautiful phrases where there isn't an exact translation in English, but essentially it means the sweetness of doing nothing, the enjoyment in resting in not having obligations, right? Almost a spiritual practice. Can we just be in that spaciousness? And so for me, I've always, tried to enjoy that. In particular, I find coming into the new year, I always have had a special appreciation for New Year's Eve, because that hope of renewal, the possibility of change, the possibility that maybe this new year might bring something a little different. And for me, from ages 7 to 19, I was always excited at the new year because I was thinking maybe this next year is the year that I finally get a girlfriend. And so one day that did work out for me, and I was able to, move on to higher pursuits. But, we find ourselves at the end of each year on a sort of a threshold, and it feels very potent. It feels like there's a lot of possibility of what might come. So maybe you're out here today and you're feeling some tentative excitement for the new year. Maybe you're feeling a little more anxious, maybe more fearful, with just a dash of hope. And I think that no matter where you are today, no matter where this hits you today, that we're all on some sort of spectrum. We all have a little bit of mixed feelings and emotions going into a new year. And so this is a message for all of us, right? I need these words as much as anyone. And the title for today's message is New Year, New Me. Because on some level, it feels a little trite that we think each year, is it really possible that I can change, that I can become something new? And yet at the same time, it is a guarantee that we're going to be new, that we're going to be changed, because change is inevitable. So there's something deeply true about that as well. And so I want to explore both of those sides today, both the side of recognizing that making changes in our life can be really difficult, and at the same token that change is inevitable, it's unavoidable. And so let's start by just acknowledging that making changes is hard, right? That even though we're just simply adding one to the date, right? It's such a simple and yet powerful change. And it creates this opportunity for us that we feel like, well, maybe there's some things that I can let go and leave behind in 2025. Or maybe there's some things that I can add that I want to bring into 2026. How many of us are out there and you made some sort of New Year's resolution? Okay, little better than last service. There's about 5 of us. There was 2.5 people in our last service who said that it was a very anti-resolution crowd. I still feel some resolution skepticism here. How many of you are like very anti-New Year's resolution? Okay, not that many either. So just a lot of indifferent people. Okay, how many of you wouldn't call it a resolution, but you do know that moving into the new year, there are things that you would like to see. Maybe some change, some growth, some healing, right? Anyone? Okay, more people. All right. For today's purposes, we're just going to call that your resolution, okay? And we're going to imagine that maybe throughout today and throughout our time together that we can, maybe if we do have some things that we'd want to see change and transformation, that maybe we can even just in the privacy of our own heart start to put some language and words to. And we're going to talk in a little bit about how that might add some power and potency to it. So I get it, though. I get that you might be skeptical of the idea of a resolution. Maybe you've even been the kind of person where you in the past you've said, yeah, I had a resolution and I failed, and it kind of discouraged me. It put me off against the idea of doing resolutions. A couple years ago, Olivia and I made a New Year's resolution together. We said that we're going to get up every day, twice a week, and we're going to go to a 6 a.m. spin class. Now, if you're out there and you're like, that sounds horrible, I get you. I'm with you. It does sound horrible. I'm kind of a morning person, but not that much of a morning person, okay? And so we did it, and we did it for about 3 weeks, okay? And then something happened at the end of that third week. And what's interesting is we never had a conversation. We never said, okay, I think that we need to stop this. One day, we just didn't get up, right? One day, we just slept in, and then a year later, we're like, hey, I guess we never continued that resolution, right? So maybe you've experienced that, and maybe there's some cynicism around that idea of change in the new year. But maybe you have come to this new year with, a desire to, let's say, have a healthier lifestyle, or a desire to be more present, or maybe you have a very specific goal in mind, right? But these things are difficult. Right, and there's a reason that we call it a resolution, is because in some ways it's the thing that we know needs work and needs intentionality behind it. It's not easy. So there's something that's powerful that happens when we can just acknowledge, like we all just did a moment ago, we can acknowledge that we want something to change, or we want something to grow, or we want something to heal in our lives. That we are honest with ourselves about where we are currently at. And that might be the most important step that we take, just that level of honesty. Because so often we ignore, or we suppress, or we deny when things are not as we would like them to be. I think we sometimes fear that we are admitting weakness, or we are admitting disappointment, or we are admitting perplexity, right? That we are admitting that we have something we'd like to achieve, and we have no idea how to get there. And that could be terrifying, because sometimes it registers as though we failed, right? We feel despair at the thought. And yet, what if that level of honesty and humility can also create an opening in our hearts and in our stories? Psychotherapist Carl Rogers said that the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Right, the dance between self-acceptance and growth. It is a paradox. It is hard to fully wrap our heads around. There's something really powerful and freeing about simply saying, here I am right now in this moment. Maybe a little lost, maybe a lot lost, maybe confused, maybe looking at something that you would like to bring into your life or bring into the world this next year, and you're just saying, I don't know how I'm going to do it. And yet, perhaps by showing up in this moment and just accepting yourself, perhaps that's the first time that you've actually accepted yourself in the middle of this struggle. Perhaps that's a new way of approaching things for you. And when we do that, perhaps what we're doing is making room in our hearts for something greater, an act of humility and surrender that invites perhaps what you might consider to be God or a higher power. Right? We're creating room in our hearts that is so often taken up by our belief that, we've got it all figured out. That takes up all this room that doesn't allow for grace to come in. Says Anne Lamott, grace happens when we're honest about our limits. So how in 2026 might we make some room for grace in our hearts? How might we be willing to be honest about our limitations in this year to come? Trusting that it's actually that kind of grace that brings about miracles, right? That can invite things into our life that we couldn't even predict. That we would find that maybe within us is a patience and an endurance that we didn't even know possible. And how many of us know we're going to need that? We're going to need patience and endurance, because these things that we would like to bring into our lives, these things that we would like to see growth, these areas, it does not happen overnight. So often we overestimate what change can happen in a day or overnight, and we underestimate what can happen in a year. We overestimate short-term change, which discourages us, but we underestimate what's possible if we stay in the race. James Clear is an author who wrote a book called Atomic Habits, where he explored how we can really endure and create lifestyle changes, habits that actually bring about long-term sustainable change. He says habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. Now let's think about compound interest for a second, because we know that this can be powerful. So there's an illustration I like when it comes to compound interest. And it's if someone were to give you a penny, right, and they were to say, every day I'm going to double that penny. So day one, it's 1 cent. Day two, 2 cents. Day three, it's 4 cents. Day four, 8 cents, so on and so forth. You know that in 30 days you would have $5 million. Now, I've gone to multiple banks and asked if they would do this for me, and no one is willing to do this. But the idea here is that this compound interest, this idea of just slow incremental change, can be so much more powerful than we realize. Now, I was thinking, what does this actually mean for our lives? Like, in a way, what is the penny of our life and our experience? Like, imagine for a second if you just put a penny towards that area of growth that you're looking for in your life. Like, imagine if you could just say, tomorrow, I just want to be 1% better in this area. I want to be 1% kinder. I want to be 1% more courageous. I want to have 1% more presence in this particular area. Does that sound doable, right? 1%, right? Just tomorrow, I'm just saying 1%. And the next day, another percent. That sounds pretty reasonable, right? If you kept that up for 1 year, because of compound interest, at the end of the year, you would be 37 times improved in that area, which sounds like a miracle, right? Imagine being 37 times improved at anything. It sounds miraculous, and yet the foundation of that miracle is essentially enduring and staying consistent in small incremental changes. Because friends, this year, this life, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so I think it's just important for us to ask ourselves, what can I do in my life that's sustainable, that I can just show up every day, even if it's just 1% more? This is what invites that grace, right? This is that patience. And lastly, something that I think is very important for us in trying to make these changes is inviting the support and the community of others around us. That even as I invited you to start articulating in your own heart what your resolution might be, there's something that happens when we can verbalize things out loud. We invite accountability into our lives. There's a study that found that when we write down a goal and we share it with someone else and we provide that person periodic updates, that we are 33% more likely to achieve that goal. Daniel Kahneman says, until we articulate what we want, our behavior stays reactive rather than intentional. How many of us have yet to articulate what we want? We know we want something, but we haven't been able to fully articulate it to ourselves. Maybe the barrier is that courage to be humble, to admit the change that we would like to see. And yet when we can do that, we not only invite others to support us, but we inspire others. Maybe by you articulating what you want, you give someone else permission to do the same. So these are just some tools that we might take with us on our journey, and that's that first side of the equation. But there is another side to this whole story, and it's the realization that change is inevitable. Yes, making changes is hard, but it's also change is a guarantee. New year, new me is not just aspirational. It's a promise, because like it or not, every single day we show up as a new version of ourselves, whether or not we realize it. Right? You might say, well, it's been a few days in this new year and I don't feel any different. There's a quote that I love. I think it's, very illustrative of change and the fact that the only real constant in life is change. And it's from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, who said, no one ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and they're not the same person. Friends, whether it's you changing or the world changing, nothing is really ever exactly as it was. The past is past. And 2025 is unrepeatable, right? I know most of us are like, great, I'm ready to leave that behind me. But even if you wanted to, even if just as an experiment you tried to repeat it, you try to do everything exactly the same, it would be impossible because you've changed and the world keeps changing. And you might say, well, that is great. I'm so glad because impermanence is actually a relief to me to think that, all things pass. And so that might be a great promise for you. And there's others of us who might think, well, change is hard. The idea that tomorrow is going to be completely different than yesterday, it's a scary notion. But either way, wherever you lie on that spectrum, the question is, how are we going to live and move with the inevitable change of life? And one of the words that I think is really powerful that can be an ally for us in this journey is the word grief. It's a word that we often avoid because it feels difficult. It's a word we often associate with the death of loved ones in particular. But what if we could also expand our definition of grief and see grief as a way that we process the way that things were? How we felt, the experiences that are now in the past, that we can also grieve aspects of ourselves. We can grieve aspects of our own journey and life experiences. How many of us just find ourselves emotional reflecting on the passage of time and how things once used to be in our lives? It's certainly something we feel around the holidays, right? And maybe you're even out there and after, the excitement of having family and friends together during this particular recent holiday season, you're now feeling a wave of maybe sadness over that experience that is now in the past. What if we could not just see grief as a response to what's going on around us, but as a muscle and as a skill that we can learn to sit with, right, and process through the reality that one chapter of our life is over so that a new chapter can begin. One season ends so another can begin. When we can sit with that reality, it makes room in our hearts. The great poet John O'Donohue once said, "Loss brings a space of emptiness into your life that opens a new place within your soul." Can we invite this? Can we allow this? Can we see this as part of our experience to let the old go so that the new can come in? It's almost like, bear with me here, it's almost like a form of soul digestion, okay? I lost more than half the crowd last service, so I'm hoping I could keep you. But imagine it like soul digestion, right? Like just like our bodies digest our food, that our souls, we digest the experiences, we digest life, that as time moves through us and as change happens, we process what once was to make room for what will be. And if that's the case, if we're going with this metaphor, then how many of us know that you can get soul constipated, okay? Some of you are out there and you're like, I'm both soul constipated and real constipated. It's the holidays, The question I have though for you is, can we learn to let go, right? Can we learn to allow, feel, sit with the emotions, let things go? Because it's our inability to let things go that hinders our ability to make space for the new, right? So maybe you're out there and maybe there's something in you that is having a hard time letting go of something that happened in 2025. But maybe in doing so, you will make room for all that 2026 might have for you. It takes incredible bravery to face the new, where perhaps the only guarantee is that there's going to be unknown and there's going to be uncertainty. The unknown is what we tend to fear most as human beings, and that's a guarantee in the new year, right? With the new year comes all kinds of possibilities, and that notion can be very scary for us. How many of us are just thinking like, I wish that I knew exactly how things are going to end in 2026. Like, I wish you would just tell me what I'm going to be feeling and what I'm going to be doing by this time next year, right? I just want all the answers. I want to know how things turn out, so I don't have any of the guesswork of what might happen. Or maybe you have a goal and you're like, I wish I knew exactly the steps I needed to take to reach this goal. Because it can be so hard to sit with the uncertainty, the not knowing. Sometimes we just want the ending. We want the answer. We want it to be handed to us on a silver platter because it's so difficult sitting in that tension that a new year brings. I had a dream over this holiday break. And in this dream, I was with God, or you might say some sort of divine, higher self. I thought of it as God, and God was saying to me, I will show you everything that's going to happen in your life. Like, I'll give you all the answers. I'll give you all the endings. I'll take the guesswork out of everything. Isn't that what you so often want? And I remember in the dream, my initial reaction to this was, oh my gosh, no, please don't show me. I don't want to know. I was begging God, I do not want to see. I don't want to know anything about what's going to happen, not even tomorrow. And I woke up and this light bulb moment went off for me because I realized that even though I so often think I want the answers and I want things figured out for me, I actually didn't. That in reality, it was the not knowing that was the joy of experiencing life, right? The curiosity, right? If I knew what was going to happen tomorrow, there would be no such thing as possibility. It would just be certainty. So this dream is very personal. Obviously, it's a revelation for me. I don't know if you can relate to that at all, but I do think that in our lives, there is this reality that while it might feel easier to have some of the answers figured out for us, it would also take away so much of the joy and the excitement and the curiosity of being human. Friends, part of uncertainty is recognizing that things always change. Because if nothing ever changed, then we would be certain about how everything was because it wouldn't be any different than as it is now. So part of our human experience is recognizing that there is impermanence in life, that everything is temporary. And that is part of the unfolding, the experience of watching things unfold as human beings. Yes, it's scary, but it's also full of joy and full of beauty. And so my question for us today is, can we embrace the uncertainty and the impermanence that comes with it? The great poet Mary Oliver said that the beauty of the living thing is the immeasurable quality of its being, its fleetingness. Friends, if we rid ourselves of uncertainty, if we rid ourselves of impermanence, if we rid ourselves of all our challenges, right? Or if we could just say, hey, any challenge that I'm facing, if I could just snap my fingers and it would all be resolved, right? If that was how our lives worked, then we would have no need for community, and we would have no need for connection, and we would have no need to surrender and open our hearts to something greater than ourselves, right? For grace. And I think if we lost all that, we would essentially lose what it means to be human. There would be so much missed. And so as we look at this coming year as a blank canvas, where perhaps the only true guarantee is uncertainty and impermanence, can we still find peace and hope all along the way? Not because we're in control, but because we've chosen connection, right? To connect with each other, to connect with ourselves in that self-honesty, showing up just as we are, and perhaps connecting to God or the divine, however you would describe it, as a form of surrender. As we look to the year to come, friends, may we not just see limitations, but will we see opportunities, that this is what it means to be human. Will we not just see uncertainty, but will we also see the joy that comes with not having all the answers? Will we not see impermanence just as something to be feared, but as something that we can also celebrate, that there is a relief in knowing that all things must pass? Can we allow the grief to come? Can we accept ourselves just as we are? And can we trust that love, grace, and peace is going to be with us every single day of this year?